So in this video today, I'm going to be breaking down the movie by Bong Joon-Ho, Memories of Murder. It's one that I'd always wanted to watch after first hearing about it, and it took me a while to finally get to it, but boy am I glad I did. It was inspired by what was described as South Korea's first confirmed serial murders, and after spending the entirety of the film looking at who the murderer could potentially be, we were left at the end with a message and a meaning that was far more powerful. So I'm going to be looking at the deeper meaning of the film, who the killer was, and the inspiration behind it, whilst also sharing my thoughts as well. So let's not wait any longer and get right into it. I think it goes without saying that this video is going to contain spoilers, and if you've clicked on a video like this, then come on, what do you expect? The ending of the film and its meaning. I'm going to start talking about this movie by looking at the ending of it, so it might be a bit backwards, but I think it's probably the best way that it will work. The final shot and scene that took place in 2003 once Park Do-man had left his job as a detective and was now a businessman, having stopped by the location of the crime scene where he first discovered the murdered woman at the start of the movie in 1986, is a scene that holds great importance when it comes to the true meaning of the film being taken away. The entirety of the film was centered around Detective Do-man, Inspector Tae-yoon from Seoul, Yong-koo, and the police force looking to solve the case that contained the serial killer that was at large and killing women in the area. The case was never solved in the film, and at the time of the film being released in 2003, the real-life cases that the film were based on were actually unsolved too. However, they have since been solved and the person was arrested in 2019. So the fact that the approach was also the same in the film was something which made the ending land with such impact. Throughout the film, both Do-man and Tae-yoon had different perspectives on how one would solve a case. Do-man had an arrogance to him and believed that he had an eye to be able to spot a killer, something which most of the first part of the film was focused on. He would bring in people that had committed crimes in the past that were similar and gave them the eye test, something which was shown the most during the interrogation of Kwang-ho, the person who had some kind of mental disability and scars on him. Whereas Tae-yoon believed more in looking at the evidence that was out there, albeit not much, and then making educated decisions based on all of the different scenarios. He was more clean-cut and followed the rules, whereas Do-man trusted his eyes, and also a psychic and their methods in believing that the face of the killer would appear once mixed with dirt. It's crazy that he was actually a lead detective. Do-man and Yong-koo would torture suspects during interrogations and almost beat a false confession out of them in order to get the case solved, even if they didn't properly believe it. Tae-yoon was actually driven to adopt their attitudes and behaviors by the end though, and he even went further than that because he actually tried to shoot Park Hyung-woo, who was the final suspect that they all believed was responsible for the murders, showing how much the case was getting to him and the yearning to put somebody behind bars. He once disagreed with those kind of methods, but he was driven to it because he genuinely believed that the killer was in front of him. The final victim, which was the young schoolgirl that was killed, represented innocence, and the fact that the killer had moved on to killing a young schoolgirl, the very person that brought Tae-yoon down to earth and he even helped earlier on in the film, was his turning point, as there was then a personal connection to the murders for him. She was brought into the shed earlier on in the movie with her friend and was told that it didn't matter if she was in a pair or on her own when she was walking back in the dark. It was said that regardless, she'd have nothing to worry about. However, when we saw that she was killed, she was on her own. So maybe if she wasn't noticed that evening by the police, she would have been with her friend like usual, and the killer might not have got her. I think Tae-yoon felt as though he let her down because he took his eyes off of Park Hyung-woo when he was supposed to be keeping an eye on him. He never had the approach of trying to get a confession out of his suspects like that, but we saw that he was beating Hyung-woo until he said that he was the killer and that he killed all of them. Hyung-woo also said, "That's what you want me to say, isn't it?" And I feel this was mentioned as it was shining a light on the fact that all of the people in the town knew what the police force were doing to innocent people behind closed doors, so it made us question if he was actually the killer or not. With the document with the fingerprint results on arriving back from America, they believed that it would match Hyung-woo, but it didn't. It was inconclusive, and it showed that he could well have been innocent as there was no match, meaning that he'd become another person that had been wrongly treated by the police force. With him walking off into the tunnel in complete darkness after avoiding the bullets, it showed that he could have been the killer, or he may not have been. We were never going to know. When the film cut to 2003 and Do-man was at the location of the crime scene from 1986, he saw a young girl that was present there, and she said to him that she saw a man looking down where he was recently. She said how this person that was there said that he did something there a long time ago, implying that it was most probably the killer that was never found that returned to the scene and saw the young girl there. When Dooman asked if she got a look at him, she said that she did, and how he looked kind of plain, just ordinary. This was such a powerful moment because it got across the message that killers aren't these monsters that lurk in the dark, act strangely in everyday life, or have been convicted of prior crimes. Something which all of the main suspects that were taken in and interrogated by the police were, and they were all found to not be the culprit, but instead these killers are out there among us, blending in with the rest of society, just looking normal and ordinary. That's the scariest thing of it all. With the crime being unsolved at the time of the film being released, and it not being solved in real life until around 15 years after it was released, I can imagine watching it back then and the weight of that ending, with Dooman looking directly down the lens of the camera towards the viewer. It'd be something that would be even more powerful, as real people died and the person wasn't found and was at large at that point. During the film, especially towards the end, it felt like the case was getting closer to being solved and there would be a sense of resolution that we get. But with all of the clues and traits that the killer did have, such as only killing women in red, killing when it's raining, killing on the day that Sad Letter would play on the radio, by the end, we saw that none of it even mattered, showing that the killer was just as much of a mystery as it was at the end compared to the start, and no progression had been made. My thoughts on the film. I thought Memories of Murder was a really good film. I'd heard so many good things about it before putting it on, but I didn't really know what to expect. The film really leaned in on the fact that you don't have to see everything to make it scary and to get across that there's a threat. Only on 2 occasions did we ever see the killer per se and them carrying out what it was that they were doing. It was awful watching the young schoolgirl being taken at the end and being tied up. The close-up of her face where there was just fear in her eyes, it was such a heartbreaking moment. Seeing all of the lights turning off in the background as well, enforcing the fact that nobody was going to be going to rescue her because of the emergency drill. It just made me feel so horrible knowing what was going to be happening. Another moment that was similar to this, which landed with impact, was the scene where the killer was in the field during the night and just peeped their head out and then vanished. It was a moment that sent shivers down my spine. The mimicking of the whistling and the animalistic crawl towards their victim was frightening. It also gave us a brief insight into the mindset of the killer, and the fact that they seemed to be enjoying the thrill of what could only be described as the hunt. It was genuinely scary. These moments would often be accompanied by a score that would kick in and make my stomach drop as well, because it would be in complete contrast to the silence that had been present for the entirety of it. The acting in this film was something that I thought was just amazing too. It was top shelf acting at its finest. I loved the difference between Kang Ho's Dooman and Sang Hyung's Taeyoon. They were both so different for the most part of the film, but we saw the both of them drift closer to the other in terms of behavior and traits, and Dooman had a bit more of a level head at the end. And Taeyoon was more reckless because he couldn't take it anymore and was just disgusted in what he saw. I thought that journey was just great to witness. In terms of films and recognition, it deserves to get the praise that it's received, because I've not seen a film like this before. Nor do I think I will for a while. This was a detective drama done in the best way possible. It went to the full extent of showing us everything that it wanted to, which provided a haunting side. It left our minds to wonder what was happening and who could have been behind it all. And it so gently and subtly made us even think that it could have been any of the detectives just as much as the suspects that were brought in. I loved that it played with our mind, and for the entirety of it, we were just in a state of confusion, and we were essentially the writer's toy. I know that some people would probably hate the open-ended nature of the final section of the film because it wasn't wrapped up and there was no real conclusion. But this was based on and inspired by real events that happened, and it wasn't solved at the time. So it was a painful reminder of what happened and treated in the same kind of way. So yeah, I kind of think that brings me to the end of this video. We've discussed the ending, broken the film down, and I've shared my thoughts, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Every week on a Sunday for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be covering non-English language films and releasing a breakdown of them. I'm thinking of doing Decision to Leave next, but I'll put it to you as well on which ones you'd like to see from that space. The likes of The Handmaiden, Parasite, Monster, Ikiru, and many others are there in my schedule, so if there's any that you'd like to see sooner than others, then let me know in the comments below. I'm going to pin a comment, so if you've got suggestions, feel free to leave them there. This won't impact all of the other shows that are covered during the week. This is just like a bonus extra that I'm thinking of throwing out on a Sunday amongst everything else that goes up on the channel. Thanks for watching the video, I do really appreciate it. And if you like this kind of breakdown on these older non-English language films, then I'll keep making more of them. I'll see you in the next one.